Cameron Norman is a private vocal student of Michelle Brock Kemp, a professor of vocal studies at Jacksonville University. Cameron's focus is on vocal performance in opera, something she's adored since a young age. She also has a love for the piano and has recently begun to dabble in guitar, motivated by her large family of musicians. Cameron is delighted to share the gift of music through performance and looks forward to bringing the wonder of opera to anyone that she can. That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Cameron, and Gary as well. Our opening words this morning are written by UU Minister Rev Gretchen Haley. There is nothing you need to bring with you to be welcome here. No right beliefs or proof of citizenship, no eternal optimism or clarity of conviction, no boundless courage or endless expertise. You do not need to know what brought you here or how you will solve that problem that you're turning over and over in your mind. Your bills do not need to be paid, and your checkbook can be a mess. Your children may have been up half the night. Your hearing aids may not be working, and your knees may be creaking. You do not need to be already perfect or even halfway to belong in this circle where grace meets us where we are, but does not leave us as it found us, where love resides in each of us, yet is somehow more than all, where life still pulses and rages and heals and transforms, creating us and this day anew once again. Come, let us worship together. My name is Linda Mowers. My pronouns are she and her, and I'd like to say good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church, which we abbreviate as BBUUC, located upon the ancestral homelands of the Timucua people, the original nations of this land. I'm so grateful and happy to lead today's worship service and to be a member of this liberal religious community for the past 33 years, as well as the fifth generation of Unitarian Universalists in my family. Here in our congregation, we affirm the theology of Unitarian Universalism. Our faith, while rooted in the Judeo-Christian tradition, draws from wisdom of all the world's great religious traditions. Our principles and values call us to live with compassion, to seek justice, and nurture spiritual growth, putting love at the center of our lives. Here we commit together to embrace the rich and beautiful diversity of the world. People of all sexual orientations and gender identities, people of all economic statuses and professions, of all physical or mental abilities, people of all races and cultures, all are welcome here. Our faith is a living tradition, evolving with time and human development, and we have a long spiritually and intellectually rich history branching from our Unitarian and Universalist roots. You might be surprised to discover the influential and amazing people who championed our faith and our values throughout the centuries, as well as today. Thinkers and theologians, social leaders and reformers, artists and authors, scientists and inventors. If you haven't explored the history of our religion and the people who have kept our chalice flame burning through the ages, you should. It's quite amazing. I believe that Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church is a place where you can grow your soul. Each week we gather for worship, education, exploration, social justice, service, community building, and friendship making. We seek to understand and honor the interconnectedness of all life and how our relationship to self, to one another, and nature impacts the world in which we live. BBUUC is all of this and more thanks to the passion, joy, and commitment of its members, friends, and staff. We are a church of seekers after truth, bound by no dogma, restricted by no creed, and known for our deeds. I'd like to give a special welcome to those here today who may be guests or newcomers. We're so glad that you're here, and we hope you'll stay with us for the fellowship time after the service. You will find beverages, including fair trade coffee and snacks at the pass-through windows at the back of the sanctuary. Be sure to wear your name tags so we can give you a warm welcome and greet you by name. It's a great time for meeting friends and sharing conversation. Please be sure to stop by our welcome table at the entryway if you haven't already done so. And there you can find information on our church and our religion. We have regularly scheduled Getting to Know Us classes year-round, and if you have any questions, please find any one of our membership folks who have a yellow sticker on their name tag with the words, "New? Ask me." They can also tell you about the path to membership. And to all of our members and friends, a reminder that March is Stewardship Month and pledge packets have been mailed to each of you. We need to return our pledges by March the 25th so that the budget process can begin in preparation for our annual meeting in May. For the many activities and events in our community, be sure to see your order of service, our monthly newsletter, The Journey, our weekly emails, and our bulletin boards. We're entering a sacred time, which we do by our presence and intention. Please turn off or silence your phones and devices, and as you do, I invite us also to turn down the volume on our fears and to loosen the armor around our hearts and breathe. And I'd also like for you to open your gray hymnals to hymn number 108. Our opening hymn this morning is My Life Flows On in Endless Song. And I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join me. We will sing all 3 verses. Here at Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church, we practice theological hospitality and welcome all people of goodwill to the life of our congregation. Since we don't have a creed or dogma, what holds us together as a community is covenant, the promises we make to one another about who we will be as a faith community and how we will be in relationship with one another as we practice the values expressed in our principles and hold reverence for our wisdom sources. Our covenant is printed in your order of service, and I invite you to speak the words together in unison. Please join me. We covenant to engage one another with honesty, kindness, and respect, to value diversity, seek understanding of our differences, and practice gracious accountability with care, love, and empathy. We make these promises to those who are here and those yet to come, so that we may be a safe, welcoming, and beloved community of acceptance, learning, and transformation. Now, I would like to invite you to rise in body or spirit again and help me sing our call to worship. The words are in your order of service. this time, I would like to invite Joanne Carollo to come forward and light our chalice as I share with you these words from Reverend Chris Jimmerson. This is the flame we hold in our hearts as we strive for justice for everyone. This is the light we shine upon systems of oppression until they are no more. This is the warmth that we share with one another as our struggle becomes our salvation. Thank you, Joanne. That was lovely. Thank you so much, Cameron and Dr. Smart as well. Our readings today are from Brené Brown and Maurice Sendak. We have two readings, actually, that are two quotations that David will share with you this morning. The first is by Dr. Brené Brown, an American professor, lecturer, author, and podcast host. She's known for her research on shame, vulnerability, and leadership. She's written 6 #1 New York Times best-selling books, hosts 2 podcasts, and has a lecture on Netflix as well as a series on HBO Max about her latest book, Atlas of the Heart.
No vulnerability, no empathy. In a culture where people are afraid to be vulnerable, you can't have empathy. If you share something with me that's difficult, in order for me to be truly empathetic, I have to step into what you're feeling, and that's vulnerable. So, there can be no empathy without vulnerability. Vulnerability is the path.
The second reading is a quote from the late Maurice Sendak, noted children's author and illustrator. He was being interviewed by Terry Gross for NPR's Fresh Air, in September of 2011, less than a year before his death. And during this interview, Sendak is very upfront with his mortality and what matters most to him as he has grown older and his health begins to decline. The whole interview is a gem, which you can find on NPR's website.
I have nothing now but praise for my life. I'm not unhappy. I cry a lot because I miss people. They die, and I can't stop them. They leave me, and I love them more. What I dread is the isolation. There are so many beautiful things in the world which I will have to leave when I die, but I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready.
The offering that we take each Sunday is an opportunity to recommit to this place and its people. Our offering is an affirmation. It's a yes. When we give, we say yes to something that we value. With our gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. May our offering help us practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation as tools to empower our mission to create and nourish a loving community that seeks justice and respect for all. Our offertory ushers, Ted Clispy and Caitlin Reagan, will come forward to accept your offering today. We're most grateful for anything you feel able and willing to give. And if you are unable to donate, we invite you to participate in this ritual by passing the plate down your row and back to the next. For those who prefer an alternative method, you can find the QR code in your order of service to donate or go to the donate link on our website at bbuuc.org. At the conclusion of our offering, I'll invite you all to rise in body or spirit and join me in hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. Our Soul Matters theme this month is exploring the path of vulnerability. And we're so happy to have our own gifted worship team member, David Dean, present a sermon entitled Sacred Vulnerability, written for the service by UU Minister Rev. Chris Jimmerson. Reverend Jimmerson is the co-lead minister for values and mission at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. Just as a side note, this is not the UU Church in Austin that former member in DLRE Chris Jarman is now serving, which is the Live Oak Unitarian Universalist Church in Austin. Reverend Jimmerson loves leading worship and the pastoral work of ministry. He has a BA in psychology from the University of Houston and a Master's of Divinity from UU Seminary Meadville Lombard School of Theology. He has a strong calling towards anti-oppression, interfaith, and social justice work, and has been especially involved in immigrant rights and racial justice. Reverend Jimmerson lives in Austin with his spouse, Wayne Bachman, and their two extremely spoiled Basenji dogs named Louisa May Alcott and Benjamin Franklin. David, the pulpit is yours.
Dr. Brené Brown, whose words we heard a few moments ago, has a lot more to say that I really love. She says, vulnerability is the core of all emotions and feelings. To feel is to be vulnerable. To believe vulnerability is weakness is to believe that feeling is weakness. To foreclose on our emotional life out of a fear that the costs will be too high is to walk away from the very thing that gives purpose and meaning to living. Unquote. She defines vulnerability as exposure, uncertainty, and emotional risk. Here's one of my favorite findings from her social science research on vulnerability. She discusses people that she calls the wholehearted, by which she means people who have embraced and can express their own vulnerability and thereby are living more authentic, loving, and connected lives. Dr. Brown says that embracing vulnerability doesn't mean never complaining about the bad things that happen in life, the things that hurt. In fact, the wholehearted can complain as much as anybody else. They just do it in a more specific and more life-fulfilling way. She says they piss and moan with perspective. Dang, I thought when I heard her say that. That would have made a great sermon title. Pissing and moaning with perspective, a spiritual practice for the ages. Now, I want to be clear, she is not talking about suffering vulnerability at the hands of racism and other forms of oppression, health issues, abusive relationships, and the like. And certainly, we have all felt some very scary vulnerability due to the pandemic. What she is saying is that while embracing our vulnerability is not weakness, neither does it mean we will never have problems, make mistakes, or suffer. It is recognizing that we will, and loving ourselves and other people, not in spite of these things, but because of them. To be alive is to be vulnerable. And yet, our cultural norms can often encourage us to project a false sense of invincibility. The prior presidential administration downplaying a pandemic, for instance. But cultivating this false sense of invincibility can drain our courage for loving and accepting being loved, rob us of the belonging and the connection that are at the center of what it means to be fully human. Now, I have struggled with this at times, all of it. Right after I started, writes Reverend Jimmerson, with the church as a new minister, I helped teach one of our Sunday morning religious education classes for kindergarten and first grade children. After the lesson, it was too cold, it was too rainy to let them go outside and play, so we had to come up with activities that they could do inside. And a few of them got bored with these activities and decided they would turn me into an indoor jungle gym instead. Soon I found myself under siege by a group of 5- and 6-year-olds. I was outnumbered, I was outmaneuvered, and I was outlandishly on the verge of experiencing pure joy. If only I would let myself give in to it. But I found myself resisting it instead. Dr. Brown calls this resistance foreboding joy, when we won't let ourselves fully experience joyful moments because we start to project what can go wrong. We start imagining all the sorrow that may come. It's like we try to ward off the sorrow in our lives by stifling the joy. That doesn't work. So, here are all the foreboding and shaming thoughts I was having as I resisted joy. Oh my God, I have to keep them on the carpeted area, or one of them is going to get hurt. I'll never get to work within Unitarian Universalism again. And, what will their parents think if they come to pick them up and find that they've tackled their Sunday school teacher and taken over the classroom? And, good golly, man, you have Reverend in front of your name now. You can't be seen acting the fool with a bunch of first graders. Sometimes my shaming thoughts have a British accent. Luckily for me, the more I resisted, the more they upped the ante. 5- and 6-year-olds have a lot of energy and determination. So I discovered that if I gave in and joined the fun, they would actually more easily accept some parameters like staying on the carpeted area. And then it was pure joy. Now, in addition to the foreboding joy I've been discussing, Dr. Brown outlines a number of other ways that we avoid vulnerability and that ultimately rob us of living fully. Here are a few of the major ones, and see if you recognize any of them. Perpetual disappointment. You may know folks who do this. These are the Eeyores of the world. Oh, well, it's never really as great as it seems. In fact, it's usually worse. Numbing. These are the ways that we avoid feeling at all, or at least dull our emotions to the point of being unrecognizable. Numbing includes the things we normally think of as addictions, such as alcohol and drugs, but it also includes things like excessive television, eating, video games, smartphone use, working too much, buying too much, etc. And research recently says that all of this increased exponentially during the pandemic. Perfectionism. She calls this the 20-ton shield when it comes to avoiding vulnerability. Perfectionism is a trap, though, because we can't be perfect all the time and for everything, and thus perfectionism can actually stifle our internal drive for excellence, because even excellent will never be perfect. So why take any real risks at all? For me, it used to be a way of sort of super numbing. I was the oldest child in my family growing up. Now, you may have heard about the oldest sibling syndrome, wherein under stress we can become overfunctioning. We start trying to take care of everything and everyone, whether they want us to or not. It's a form of perfectionism. My mom was single, so I got a very strong dose of this. My maternal grandparents were like a second set of parents to me. My grandfather became my father figure, and I pretty much idolized them both. They were my role models. So, when I got the call one day, many years ago now, that my grandfather was in the hospital, and it did not look good, I went into sort of an over-functioner's perfect storm. I didn't stop to cry or grieve or feel anything. I started making plans to make the drive over to take care of my family. I was going to handle this situation perfectly. And when we got to the hospital and he was no longer conscious, so that I did not even get to say goodbye, I didn't cry or grieve. I took care of everyone else. And when I got the call the next morning that he had passed, I didn't cry. I got up, I got dressed, I started planning, and I started taking care of things. And even when I gave the eulogy at his funeral, I still didn't cry, nor at the reception afterwards, not on the drive back home, not after I got back home. I was too busy functioning. And then, I think it was maybe a couple of days later, couldn't find my glasses. So I went out to our car, thinking maybe they'd fallen under a seat or something. I started searching for them, and I didn't find them. But I did find a map that my grandfather had given me. He was a traveler. He was big on maps, and he'd written his name on it. My grandfather had this habit of writing his name on all his belongings. And suddenly, sitting there, alone in the car, clutching his map, with no one left to take care of anymore but me, I ran out of ways to avoid it. And I started weeping. And for a while, it felt as if I may never stop. I have a friend who's a playwright. And he once had one of his characters, after having lost her entire family in a car wreck, says, I don't have to cry now. I can cry tomorrow, or next week, or next month, or next year, because it's never going to stop. It's never going to stop hurting. And I guess that was kind of what I'd been doing, trying to put off feeling the hurt. It doesn't work eventually, but his character was right about this. It really never does stop completely hurting. We just learn to carry it with us. And I think that's maybe as it should be, because for me, it's also carrying them with us. My grandparents are the people who taught me to have a love of nature. To this day, even though they've both been gone many years now, I'll be on a nature hike and I'll see something that is so beautiful that it just fills me with joy, and I think I have to call them and tell them about it. Their old phone number, 409-962-2010, it pops into my head. Of course it is someone else's number now. The thing is, because this happens, the joy of the experience is also deeper. It's greater. It's more complex. It helps keep their memory alive in my heart. It's a way in which I can at least somewhat re-experience their love. I call it a joy so full, it is an aching joy rather than the foreboding joy we talked about earlier. Writer and poet Khalil Gibran said it like this: the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. And that is why numbing robs us of living fully. That's the reason to seek lives of vulnerability and authenticity. If we refuse to allow sorrow to carve into our being, we will also never experience the fullness of that aching joy. I think as the church and our world begin to deal with whatever the next phase of the pandemic may bring us, and whatever else we are facing where we live, we will need to be willing to be vulnerable with one another. We will need honesty and a willingness to share our emotions. And I think we create in this church a space where we can bring our vulnerabilities and our whole selves. And that then can help us be more wholehearted in our larger worlds also. And I think it starts by being willing to ask for the space to be vulnerable, and by being willing to risk it, to reach out and say, I have been trying to take care of my family, but I am emotionally exhausted myself. Or I have been afraid about going back to work in person at my office because what if the vaccines suddenly start to fail? I don't have anywhere else where it feels safe to share this fear. We work to create in this religious community a space where we can do that. A church where we can practice living authentically. A place where we are allowed to be vulnerable and imperfect, to make mistakes and be forgiven for them rather than shamed for them. A place where we are courageous enough for empathy to thrive. A place where we love and accept love, and we radiate that love out into our larger world. A community where life's hallowed sorrows and aching joys can be sung to the rafters and held by beloved community. A community that I love with my whole heart. And now let me add to Reverend Jimmerson's words by inviting this beloved community to sing into the rafters. And we certainly have some. It is hymn number 1012 in the Teal hymnal, and it's called When I Am Frightened. I don't believe we have sung this before, but I think it's pretty easy, and I think you're going to like it, and you're going to want to sing it again. Gary will play it through once. Our song leaders will help you out with it. Please rise in body or spirit, and by all means, let's sing to the rafters.
you. Isn't that a beautiful hymn? Y'all did great for a first time around. We'll sing it again, I hope. So Joanne, would you please come forward and extinguish our chalice as I share our benediction? These are the words of UU Minister Rev Scott Taylor. As we go, may we remember that we were never meant to make it through this life alone. Vulnerability is a doorway, friends. Those wounded and tender pieces of ourselves help us return to each other. What seems wounded or unworthy, when shared, becomes our strength. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.